Greetings and welcome again to Fantastic English Fluency Tips and more. Good to be with you again today. As you remember, my name is Charles. Nice to meet you. For first comers, good to meet you. And for returnees, subscribers, good to see you again and be here with you. Today we're going to be talking about connecting words and deleted sounds in words for English fluency. A lot of this will be practice for you, but it will also be training for your ears, learning how to hear a native speaker speak and catch what they're saying. The more you can understand of what is being said, the more you can speak fluently about what is on your mind in regards to what someone is saying. In other words, answering questions or responding to what is being said. So let's jump right into this today. First, the very simple sentences and simple word, but the connections or the linkings are a little bit difficult for some people who are just beginning to learn English or learning to really understand English. Well, the first one I have here, if you'll look up at the board, is Mr. and Mrs. Jones. You can see that and read that, and if you read it, Mr. and Mrs. Jones, there's no problem with that. It's very clear and it's understood. However, if you're not emphasizing the fact that they're both together and you're just trying to say it in a flowing, regular way of speaking, you don't want to say Mr. and Mrs. Jones. You would say Mr. and Mrs. Jones. Please look at the board. You can see here it's written out Mr. and Mrs. Jones. Well, the A and the D are almost undetectable. You almost cannot hear them. Please listen to the way I say it with the A and the D deleted. Mr. and Mrs. Jones. Mr. and Mrs. Jones. You see, I don't go into the Mr. and Mrs. way of speaking, but I connect Mr. and Mrs. It's like one word almost. Mr. and Mrs. Jones. You see? How about if you try that? Good. Once more. No, don't put the the d in there, but just the n is enough. N. You got that? Okay. Repeat after me. Mr. and Mrs. Jones. Yes, we're not talking especially quick or fast here. We're just connecting words where it sounds like we might be speaking very quick. Let's try that again. Mr. and Mrs. Jones. Okay, I'm sure you did well on that one. Let's try another one. Mr. and Mrs. Sato. A Japanese name, isn't it? Mr. and Mrs. Sato. I'm saying that with the American English pronunciation, of course. You wouldn't say Sato in Japanese, but we do say it that way in the American English. I'll say that once more for you. Mr. and Mrs. Sato. Here's another one. Mr. and Mrs. Suzuki. Mr. and Mrs. Suzuki. You see that Mr. and Mrs. are connected. Mr. and Mrs. And the RS in Mrs. is pronounced more like a Z, as you can hear. Did you catch that? Mr. and Mrs. Mrs. You could say that, but often it's ZZ, Zuzu. Zuzu Ben. No. Sorry to play around there. Mr. and Mrs. Suzuki. Okay, let's go to some other names, shall we? No Mr. and Mrs., but two friends who might be together doing something, having lunch or walking, talking, whatever. But let's talk about Harold and Wanda. Harold and Wanda. Harold has a D in it. We want to pronounce that. But and is not spoken clearly, is it? Harold and... Yes. Harold and Wanda is spoken Harold and Wanda. Harold and Wanda. Please try it. Harold and Wanda. Good. Did you get the d and the n correct there? All right. It's if you know this, then it's easier for you to understand what someone's saying when it's all connected and squished together. Well, we say linked normally, or connected. Here's another one. You and Susan. You and Susan is spoken. You and Susan. You and Susan. Yes, the S in Susan in the middle is also spoken like a Z. Very often the S in the middle will be pronounced Z rather than S. So you just catch that. You'll learn that as you learn more words and learn to speak them. Let's do that once more. You and Susan. And we have one more here. Bob and I. Bob and I. Can you do that? Please repeat after me. Bob and I. Yes, that's good. Bob and I. Bob and I is not the clear way of saying it. It's clear in the sense that you're saying each word very specifically, and it's of course understandable, but native spoken daily English is more like Bob and I. Okay, good. Look at the sentences, please, on the board. I'll write them here for you first. This is with the words where and what. We also are connecting does with where, and the pronoun he and she with where and what. Now these are interesting connections, so really listen closely so you can catch them quickly. Listen please. Where does he work? Written on the board. You can see where the connecting line is and where the deleted, omitted line is across the H. Yes. Where does he work is most generally spoken, where does he work? You see, does is not clear, real overly pronounced either. It's does. And the H in he, did you see that? Boom, there's a line right through it. It's not even said. You don't need to pronounce it clearly in this connection. Okay, you look at the board and I'll say it for you. Where does he work? Do you get that? Where is emphasized a little, connected with does, and the H in he is omitted. In this phrase where it's connected and sounds like one word, you don't need to pronounce the H. Let's go over this question again. Where does he work? You see, a WH question, where, what, when, why, who, how. These are all questions that you do not go up at the end, you draw up at the end, as I just did. Next one is, with she, where does she live? It's connected, where does she? It's like one word. Where does she live? You see? Where does she live? Where does she live? Let's try one with what now. We just used where in two examples. Let's use what, shall we? This is with he. The H is also deleted. With does, connected to the what. Let's try it. What does he do is the question, and in the native sounding, the native spoken English fluency, we would say, what does he do? What does he do? You see how that's chopped down? It's connected like one word. Listen again. What does he do? What does he do? You try. What does he do? Good. Did you bite your tongue? Don't worry if you do. You can keep trying. Try it slow first, and then you can connect it a little bit more naturally as you go along. You don't have to say it fast at first. Where does he work? Yeah, you could do it that way. What does he do? I would like to point out that the T in what is not what. It's what is. It's connected into the D, so you aren't actually pronouncing the T clearly. You're going to, it's like you're going to say it, but you go into the D pronunciation of does, you see. Try that again. What does he do? You see, it's not what does, it's what does, what does, what does, what does. You could try that. What does, what does, what does, what does, what does he do? What does he do? Oh, of course, you could emphasize it and say it that way, but the natural flow is what does he do? Oh, great. Let's keep going on. Let's go back to she now. We talked about him. Well, how about her? What does she do? What does she do? You see, I just compared her with him, so I emphasized the she a little bit in regards to him, so I emphasized the she because I had asked about him already. But just normally spoken or asked, we say, what does she do? What does she do? You see, it's all connected. What is she? What is she? The T is diminished, connected into the D. The does is does. What does she? Then do at the end is spoken clearly in a question form. What does she do? What does she do? Now remember to, on these what, where questions, to drop your intonation or your emphasis at the end of the sentence. Don't go up, but stay at a dropping pace, please. Let's go to another one. This is a little bit different. I think I shared these in another video which you could look at on the playlist and find other tips for connecting phrases. I use some of these and others. So it's a little bit of repetition here, but it's done in a new way for your fluency today. So let's go into a couple more questions. This one is about where, and he, again, where does he shop? The verb is different, but it's the same practice. Where does he shop? Where does he shop? It's not the way you want to say it here. You want to connect it. Where does he shop? Where does he shop? Please repeat. Where does he shop? Oh, good. You did great there. Now let's go to another one. This time we'll use she. Where does she eat? Where does she eat? Where does she eat? Good. Let's go to another one with what. What does he cook? What does he cook? What does he cook? The T is connected into the D. What does he cook? You see, and the H is deleted in he. What does he cook? Try it. Good, okay. Now let's do one more with she. What does she talk about? What does she talk about? What is she? What is she? Okay, let's try it again. This time repeat after me. What does she talk about? Good, once more. What does she talk about? Oh, these are the connections for what and where today, and the usage of and with the deleted A and D. How did you do on those? Let's just review each one real briefly so that we don't wear you out, so you don't get too tired listening to all of these tips. Let's go for this now. These two connections for today. All right, please repeat. I'll just do one of each of them. Mr. and Mrs. Sato And you can repeat after me. Mr. and Mrs. Sato. Good. Harold and Wanda. You and Susan. Bob and I. All right, let's go to the where and what connections with does and he and she. Just one each. Where does he work? Repeat, please. Where does he work? Good. Let's go with she now. And where does she live? Where does she live? Where does she live? Repeat. Good. Let's go to what now? What does he do? What does he do? Your turn. Good. Let's go to she and what? What does she read? What does she read? Okay, how did you do with those? I changed the sentence there, but there was the same practice, so I hope you did well. And you can re-listen to these and practice them over and over. Remember, practice makes what? Perfect. Well, you improve. We're not seeking for perfection, but we do want to improve constantly, don't we? Yes, you can look at other videos on phrases and word connections. I have a couple of them up on the playlist. I'll put one or two up there so you can find them easily and study and review those. Please do tell a friend, and remember to turn your notifications on, subscribe, and yes, give us a like. See you on the next one, and keep happy and do stay well. Bye now.